This morning's speaker, I have not had the pleasure of meeting until recently. Some of you knew him from before. I didn't. But when he approached me and said that he had a very interesting presentation he'd like to make, I obviously agreed. Warren Johnson was born in Fort Worth but grew up in Dallas. He is a Marine Corps veteran and a 1981 graduate of the University of Texas at Austin with a Bachelor of Business Administration and a minor in history. He is a real estate broker working mainly in property management and investment property, but also works with his wife, who has a residential realtor with their own company. He has a long list of historical preservation work that he's done, which he will share in his presentation. Warren became aware of the SAR in 2016 when he saw a bearded George Washington in the elevator of his condo building. It turns out it was Tom Whitelock. Warren fell under the spell of Tom's superb salesmanship, and a few months later he was a member. During 2016, he also served as the chapter's first vice president. To talk to us this morning about the Robert E. Lee statue in Lee Park and other things, please welcome Warren Johnson.
This is kind of going to be the subject matter. What this is, picture looks like it's. I'll start on this side. Tom, you going to have it all?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll let you do that.
After that comment.
You betcha. Thank you, George. While he's doing that, that's the subject matter. How do I do this? Okay, that takes some time. Okay. And I've got a few pictures we're going to throw up there, but they're mainly to act as an outline for me. And while he's doing that, I want to share with you some responses I got. This was a mailer sent out to the neighborhood of where Lee Park is. Does everybody know where Lee Park is in Dallas? Okay, over there in Turtle Creek area where I live, 3 blocks from where Tom and I live. And I want to, again, share with you, I want to get my specs on, some of the response I got. Of course, I was searching for, and I did asking for donations to carry on this fight, and I did get some donations. And in fact, I got 2 checks I got in yesterday's mail. I'm getting ready to go deposit. But here's one of the first ones I got. So the name of the group is Return Lee to Lee Park. It says, "Hello, Return Lee Park Group. Robert E. Lee was, according to Ken Burns, a fine man. I agree with his arguments. I initially placed your mailer in the trash bin. I'm a homeowner on Turtle Creek and a longtime resident of Dallas. Mr. Lee, a fine man and all, chose the wrong side. Aside from all arguments, we do not celebrate people who fought against the United States, nor do we offer statues of them as participation trophies. I'm now returning the mailer to the trash bin, where this effort also belongs." Here's another. "I'm appalled you don't have anything better to do with your time and money. Robert E. Lee holds absolutely no significance to Dallas. He did not fight any battles here. I doubt that he's ever even came here. Robert E. Lee was a traitor to the United States, and you, capitalized, are a racist. Shame on you." So anyway, that's some of the responses I've been getting. This was in yesterday's mail. So we're still working on coming up? Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, what it'll do is show a picture up here of that. Again, that's more acting as a guide. Now, when I first started this, and because I was asking for money for donations to carry on the fight, a lot of people were saying, well, why should we invest in you? What kind of background do you have? You have no accomplishments or anything like that. And I said, well, I better put together a resume. So if it ever gets up there, we'll show a resume.
Should I do something?
Well, let me see. Oh, I'm sorry, it went to sleep. There we go. Okay, that's going to start that. And probably just go right there. Resume
Sure.
comes up. And we'll go here. Okay, may not be able to read that, but this is where we'll go. I'm a Marine Corps veteran, as it said. I know we got one Marine in here. Do we have any other Marines? All right. And I don't know what it was like a year or two before I went to boot camp before you. I mean, you went to boot camp obviously before me, maybe only by a year or two. But Marine Corps history was a big part of boot camp. I don't know if it was that part. So that's where I got my first introduction to how important history was. Like I said earlier, I got a minor in history. I'm a founding member of the Collin County Historical Preservation Group. The reason I was a founding member of the Collin County Historical Preservation Group because myself and another little group of little old ladies got kicked off the Collin County Historical Commission because we dared to defend the old Collin County Courthouse. All the county commissioners wanted to get rid of the courthouse, wanted to sell it, but we felt it should stay. You know the Collin County Courthouse, have you seen it in McKinney? The reason you can still see it there is because of me and this little group of old ladies. This is back in the late 90s. So I got some success at doing this. I'm the former president of the Allen Heritage Guild up in Allen, Texas. I wrote the Allen Heritage Guild historical marker for St. Mary's Church in Allen, Texas, a little African-American church that's been there forever. I wrote the Allen Heritage Guild historical marker for Speaker on Life of Texas First Train Robber Sam Bass. I'll give some thoughts on that. I wrote the application for the Texas State Historical Marker for Allen, where it sits today. I wrote an application for the Registered Texas Historical Landmark status for the old Collin County Courthouse and Sunset High School in Dallas. This is in 2015. I wrote the application for the State Archaeological Landmark status for old Collin County Courthouse and Sunset High School. I was the creator of Return Lee to Lee Park, a state-registered nonprofit 501c3 organization. I'm a former member of Preservation Dallas. I resigned over the issue with Lee statue, and I'll get into that. I'm a holder of the Historic Home Specialty designation awarded by Preservation Dallas. And I was also an independent candidate for Collin County Commissioner Precinct 3 in the year 2000, again, over the old Collin County Courthouse. So that's kind of my background. Okay. Perfect. Excellent timing. Let me give you a little background here on how I got involved in this. Almost exactly a year ago at this time was the first time I found out that they were going to remove the statue of Robert E. Lee and Young Ryder, which is its official name, from Lee Park. Kind of shocked me. Now I assumed, okay, this is a political stunt. Somebody's trying to get some publicity. And if it is serious, a group like the Sons of the Confederate Veterans or the United Daughters of the Confederacy or, let's see, what was that group there? The Lee Park Conservancy, which had Lee Park Conserve in its name. And I'd just given them $175 a month before. Or Preservation Dallas would stop this nonsense and it wouldn't go any further. Well, that didn't happen. They didn't stop it. It was removed. But before it was removed, I said, I need to go down there and take a good look at this. And so I went and walked around the statue, spent a morning down there, and I looked over it very closely. And I realized this is really a beautiful work of art. It indeed is, and it really fits where it not only sits, but where it faces. And I looked closely at the statue, and I could find no markings of any army to designate what service they were with. Certainly the word Confederate nor CSA appeared anywhere on that statue. The wording around the statue, on some of the plaques and some of the marble over there, said nothing about the Confederacy or slavery or a fight or a battle or destruction or rebellion, anything like that. Had nothing to do with that. So I just kind of walked away, and I was really kind of disturbed about this, and I didn't know what to do. So there was another group that was coming up to kind of show its support, even though the statue was already gone. So I went up there to speak to them and thank them for being there, and gave them my card and told them, look, I might be able to help you. I've got a little background in this. If you can need any help, just give me a call. It's called This is Texas Freedom Force. And so nobody ever called. Nobody ever contacted me. I even went on their website and asked to join, and they didn't respond to that. So I spent about 2 or 3 months trying to figure out what to do. I was really bothered by this, and I couldn't figure out why. So I created a Facebook group called Put Lee Back in Lee Park. Is anybody here on Facebook? Maybe not. Okay, well, I got a group called Put Lee Back in Lee Park. And that was on December the 1st. By the end of December, I had 1,200 people on board. And so it began to take off. Now, when I started researching this whole statue of Lee, I went home and I found out, okay, it was created by a renowned sculptor by the name of Alexander Phemister Proctor. This guy right here, he's known as the buckskin sculptor, I believe. And the Dallas Southern Memorial Association back in the early 1930s raised $50,000 to have this statue made. And it was dedicated in 1936. President Franklin Roosevelt came during the Texas Centennial in June of 36 and dedicated the marker, all right, or dedicated rather the statue. Also at Lee Park, there's a three-fourths replica, meaning it's three-fourths the size, Arlington Hall, which is still there. And the fountain that's across the street in Lee Park, or just across from Lee Park, is dedicated to all the Confederate soldiers. Now this, it's not up there, but I'll show you the young rider that's right behind Lee. There's a plaque down there and says, on that statue, on the base there, that says, by the way, that base was built by the WPA. WPA money built that base, as well as Arlington Hall. Said this is not an aide de camp to Lee. This is to represent all the young of the South. So that was out there. Now, again, I wrote an email to all the city council members and said, look, I wish you guys hadn't done this. I'd like to get it back. What can we do? I only got a response from one council member. That was Callahan out of East Dallas area, further East Dallas, close to Mesquite. And he suggested a citizens initiative, which if you can get 10% of the voters in the city of Dallas to sign a petition, we can put it on the ballot. Well, there's 660,000 registered voters in the city of Dallas. There's no way I was going to get 66,000 signatures. So I said, okay, now what do I do? So I decided, probably going to need some legal help. So I decided to raise funds. That's why I created this 501c3, to seek some legal help. And while I was raising funds, and I got a little bit, I was literally sitting on the couch, and I got a call from a guy with the Sons of Confederate Veterans. Now, I thought were just like non-existent, but evidently they've been fighting this, and they've been fighting it for a while, just kind of under the radar. So they asked if I'd join in a lawsuit. So I agreed to join the lawsuit. But again, I'm still searching and researching about Lee. Now, if you can go to the regarding Lee, where it says Johnston. Okay. This one, that one, nope.
Next one.
On the far left. This one over here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Other far left.
Other one.
I was like most people. I thought Robert E. Lee, and all I learned was that Lee was the commanding general of the Confederate forces, and they lost. That's all I really knew. All right. But when I began to research Lee, I came over this book. It's called Robert E. Lee in Texas. I found out that Lee, of course, not only was a military academy, West Point graduate, all right, he served as and here's kind of what Lee looked like back in the 1850s. He served bravely in the Mexican-American War. General Winfield Scott, and I think we got a picture of him in there too somewhere on the right. On your, the right. No, I'm sorry, he's the old looking guy right over here. Excuse me, I take presentation. There we go, that's General Winfield Scott. General Winfield Scott was commanding general at that time during the Mexican-American War, and we realized the Mexican-American War partly was fought to save Texas from being soared back into Mexico. General Winfield Scott called Robert E. Lee America's finest soldier. After the Mexican-American War, Winfield Scott appointed him superintendent of the United States Military Academy, where he served for 2 years. After 2 years of the United States Military Academy, he was sent to Texas, where he served and commanded the 2nd Cavalry. Actually commanded it. We'll go back to those list of 4 people on the far left there. There we go. I believe this is Johnston, I believe his name. Robert Sidney Johnston. Lee served under him as commander of the 2nd Cavalry, defending the forts from just to the frontier. The frontier back in the 1850s was just not far west of here, from about the Red River all the way down to Brownsville. And he had to command those forts. He commanded them for 6 years, and he was instrumental in protecting the settlers on the frontier from vicious attacks. Okay, so now you have Lee. Now, the reason they don't want Lee in the park is because of his ties to the Confederacy, and that's where most people think that's all he ever did. But Lee actually, 32 years as a United States Army officer, 6 years in the state of Texas defending us against vicious attack. If anybody deserves to be in a park, it's Lee in Texas. That's my contention, and that's what I'm kind of fighting for. Now, that being said, okay, so I put this out and I've started to raise funds. And we've gotten some funds. We've got several $1,000s. And the SCV has contacted me, and we're on a lawsuit. We've filed to put Lee back, and we actually go to trial in March. March 19th, I believe, is the date. So, but in the meantime, I'm still trying to raise more funds to, pay. Actually, I don't have to pay a nickel. The SCV's picking this up, but boy, they're bit into it quite a bit. So I'd like to contribute some to that cause to get Lee back. Now, let's go to where it says, "Where's Lee?" All right, the one on the next to Winfield Sky. This is what we have here today, right? Lee is gone and Young Soldier is gone. We've got an ugly hole in that neighborhood. It's a blight to the neighborhood. When they first removed Lee, all the newspaper articles and such were out there, well, Lee's gone and he's never coming back. Just last week, on July 30th, any of you familiar with the Dallas Observer, that magazine? They wrote an article. They're fearful that Lee may come back. So evidently we're making an impact, all right? So that's kind of it's a short speech I've got today, but I just wanted to make everybody aware of what's going on with Lee. I'm going to open this up to questions, but in the back, the treasurer, I've got a couple of books I'm donating to the cause as part of my research. I got a couple of good coffee table books about Alexander Phemister Proctor. One of them is his, he's holding them up back there. One of them is an autobiography, and another one's a biography that tells, and I've got a little couple bookmarks in there. That's kind of where the primary reading is because they're very big. There's a lot of content in there. But in essence, that's my presentation, and I want to open this up to questions and be happy to take them. And, yes, sir.
I don't have a question, but don't you have one guy that fought to get Lee out of there gone now?
Yes, we do. Yeah, there's one particular man who actually, now I was like most people when this all started. I had no idea who my city councilman was not involved in local politics. National and state politics is more sexy. You can talk more people about it, and they all kind of knew. But I tell you what, in the vernacular of our time, I am woke now. I know who my city councilman is. My city councilman led the fight to remove Lee. All right? And this is the crap they use, excuse me for saying this, but they have total and utter ignorance of history. They have no idea that Lee served long and hard in the state of Texas. And for that, he deserves to be in that park. He deserves to have statues. He deserves to have names, schools named after him. I don't know if you're familiar, but there's a Robert E. Lee High School in Tyler, Texas.
Baytown, Texas.
What's that? Maybe in Baytown, but they just tried to change the name of Robert E. Lee High School. And a little group of Steel Magnolias stood up, and the board backed down. So they're not changing the name of Robert E. Lee High School. As far as I know, that's the first instance of where fighting back is taking hold. And make no mistake, we're in a war here. We're in a cultural war. The reason they chose this statue, Lee and Lee Park, because it was easy. I started noticing this about 2 years ago, but there's a thing out there I call the beast. And the beast is ravenous. Now, a predator always goes after the weakest animal in the herd. All right, so they saw this statue as the weakest animal, so they took it. And now they're emboldened. Now they got their eyes on Pioneer Park over next to City Hall. They've got their eyes on every Confederate statue. And then they're going after the Union statues. Then they're going after the American Revolution statues. They're out to get every one of them. Make no mistake, it is a war. Yes, sir.
I did recently agree they're considering changing the name of Boston.
What's that?
Boston.
Oh, well, yeah, I mean, it's all over. It's rampant. It's epidemic. And if we don't put a stop to it, it's just going to continue. There's a saying out there, what we will allow will continue. Yes, sir.
I live not too far from what used to be Stonewall Jackson Elementary School on Mockingbird. That's been changed. Now, in my humble view, this whole business was made possible by the damn Supreme Court when they said that it's okay to burn the flag. They're the people who started this whole mess. Now, I feel that this political correctness is really idolatry of a political agenda.
Well, it's obviously a political agenda. Okay, and if, again, and the beast is there to weaken us. And if they can take away our statues and put us, make us feel bad about our past, then we won't put up a fight. And so that's where, that's where I decided to start doing historical research. I needed to get out there and find, okay, I'm a big fan of the truth, so I wanted to know the truth. And this is where I found out Lee served in Texas. I had no idea. I bet you nobody else, very few people knew that he served in
I
Texas.
did.
Did you know?
We have forts out in our part of the world in which Lee served.
Yes, that's the Texas, you can go out there right now and stand in them. Texas Forts Trail is right out there. And I've got to go back out there and see if they've even put in those forts that Lee had served in that area. Can you pass something else out for me?
Sure.
I'm going to pass these out. This is some ways you can get information on, there's a YouTube video out there. If you go to the website that I've got there on that mailer, there's a YouTube video that was made. I was interviewed about this back in May. And it gives a little better explanation of what's going on, how I got there and what's going on. And it's also interviewing one of the state officers with the Sons of Confederate Veterans. I thought they were distant. They just don't have much publicity. They've been fighting this monument battle for about 20 years. They even had the Texas Sons of Confederate Veterans even went to the Supreme Court in 2005. They lost, but they went in 2005. It was over a Confederate flag on the Texas license plate. And regardless of how you feel about the Confederacy, it's there. It happened. I'm starting to do more research about it, about why there was a rebellion at the time, or was it a rebellion? Was it a debate? On and on and on. I don't know. So I have to still research and find that out, at least for myself.
They're trying to rewrite history. Stalin and
Well,
the Chinese are the only people who've successfully done it until now.
right. And if you go back, and you said it started with being able to burn the flag, and there does have some relations. Where I take it back to, at least where I became aware of it, or woke of it, was remember, and it may have been 20 years ago, before 9/11, when the Taliban started destroying those historical statues that have stood there for thousands of years. Okay? And then if you kind of take it backwards, say, okay, now I'm beginning to see this pattern. Now you got coming up, what's today, the 11th? Tomorrow's the 12th. This is the anniversary of Charlottesville. Antifa's going to make hay out of that. All right? September the 14th is the first anniversary of the removal of Lee's statue. I expect some hay to be made out of that. Now, things have changed. The reason I don't have a kind of what I call a set presentation is because every time I did, something would change, okay, that might have an effect. Today is Saturday, so Thursday the Dallas City Council had a pretty big incident happen where one of the council members didn't get charged. He pled guilty to corruption. Of course, he's one of the ones that led the fight to remove the Lee statue, okay? They kept saying that Lee's statue was going to cost $450,000 to remove. All right, I sent out Freedom of Information Act requests on what it cost. I got back some invoices totaling less than $100,000. Of course, it was all heavily redacted. All right? I got one very generic invoice, so heavily redacted you could not tell anything about it other than it was $375,000. Okay, and it was like somebody created it on a Facebook page, but on the internet from a download. If you read what he pleaded guilty to taking was $450,000. So I'm wondering if there's that connection. All over talk radio yesterday and in the news,
They expect him to just be the first one. They expect other city council people to have some fallout on this as well. So it's kind of like, all right, a little bit of karma coming around so this whole thing may change, and it's changing rapidly. It seems like, with people with corruption and people taking money. So anyway, any other questions regarding this? Yes, ma'am, back in the back.
Can you speak a little bit about what the legal argument is and what the goal of the trial, what the outcome of the trial would be?
Sure. Why we're having the trial and what the legal arguments would be? There's several. Even though I'm raising money to get our own attorney. I've spoken to an attorney. We were going to talk about how much it was going to cost to maybe do this. You never know how much anything on a legal issue is going to cost, but plan on spending X. In the middle of that is when I got the call from the Sons of Confederate Veterans to join their lawsuit. Since it was free, I said, yes, I'll join in with you. But this guy's still in the back, and I may contact him. There's a couple of reasons. My main concern, or what I'm trying to find out, is who owns the statue. Now, I'm in the real estate business, and we're big in chain of title from the beginning to the end, to the date. So I've sent a Freedom of Information Act request to the city of Dallas. This is back in January, February. Who owns Lee statue? I want the chain of ownership from the day it was created to date. All right? I still have yet to receive that. They sent, I guess whenever you do a Freedom of Information Act request, they send it off to the state attorneys general to make sure they can do it. The state attorney general sent it back, said, yes, give Warren what he wants. The city of Dallas filed a lawsuit not to give that to me. I was able to find out because there's a bunch of us early on, we sent off a Freedom of Information Act request mainly to find the charges or the amount that it took to remove the statue. And so we talked back to each other when we found out who each other was. And one guy, I guess he's the guy that got the first group to send out, and first bunch of information. What I got from the city of Dallas was about 30 pages after it was gone about 2 months or a month. This guy got 687 pages of stuff. He sent it to me. In there was 2 emails from one city council, not a member, but a upper echelon management in the city of Dallas. Sent an email response to somebody that said, we don't have proof of ownership for the statue, so we don't know who owns the statue. So that's my thing. The lawsuit we've got going now is that since there is a state historical marker on the area where that statue is, and because Lee and that statue itself, because it is Alexander Phemister Proctor, and it's been there for so long, has historical significance to Texas. And so that's the lawsuit, which is called, do we have any attorneys in here? Okay. What is it when you force a governmental entity to do what it's supposed to do? Mandamus. We're looking at forcing the Texas Historical Commission to protect the property. Okay. Now, since I did have an attorney there, I'm going to ask you, what do you think about all this? What's this attorney right in front of you?
Most likely the city of Dallas owns it because it was installed on real property. It was a permanent installation. It became part of the real property, which is owned by the city of Dallas, and therefore it would be owned by the city of Dallas. And there really wouldn't be any documents to establish that. It's just like when you build a house on real property, the house is now part of the real property.
That's correct, and you're absolutely right. And that's one battle I'm going to fight. So what we're trying to find out now is who has, again, I'm new to this legal stuff, who has standing. All right? And so I personally don't have standing with that statue, but we're hoping to convince and find, if we can find the chain of ownership, who originally owned it. Because I think there's something in art. If you're going to get rid of art, especially fine art, you have to offer it back to the creator. Does that make any sense? Okay, I think that's, what's that?
Post 1950, I think the artist who created the art, it was created before, I think 1950, can still retain the copyright to it.
Right, that's possible.
Before 1950, he
copyright when he sells the art or gives it away. He gives away the copyright as well.
Well, that's kind of, we're breaking new ground. The attorney that I spoke with, who we were talking about having a fight for this, we're trying to figure out the way that Dallas is supposed to dispose of property. If it is, again, the property of the city of Dallas, how are they supposed to dispose of it? Okay, if it's, does it have to go through certain channels? Does it have to go through, does it have to meet certain guidelines or whatever? We're trying to figure that out. Dallas, and I can see why now after Thursday, Dallas is being very closed. You know, they're holding their cards close to their vest. They're not letting any information out. And after Thursday, I can see why.
Who made the sculpture?
The Dallas Southern Memorial Association raised the funds, $50,000 to do that. And they're still in existence, but they're more shrinking violets now than steel magnolias. They're afraid of being called racist. And that's the big gun that the other side has, is they have people's guilt or people's conscience that you try to play on. And so if you don't want to be called a racist, they got a hammer over you. They got a gun to your head, right? I don't mind being called a racist. I'm not, but I don't mind being called a racist. It's just part of the battle I've got to do. And I guess I have to admit, at first I was concerned about being called a racist. But I read that and said, didn't hurt a bit. So the fight is on. Anything else? I guess we're done here. All right. Thanks for your time. Oh, that's right. I've done this before. But I'll start gathering up my...
Okay, all right. Well, if that doesn't provoke some thought, what a presentation. Warren, thank you again for taking the time.
You're welcome.
Every program, every situation has to have a champion, and obviously you are a fine champion for this cause.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
What we'd like to do is obviously give you a certificate of appreciation for the work and the time.
Yes, up here.
If you can get that button.
I've got that.
Okay.
Hurry up, Tom. I'm sucking it in. Oh, that's right. I forgot about all that.
And,
Great, thanks.
well,
Oh, the cannon.
Oh, this is even better.
The bell.
The Liberty Bell.
I used to give these out, now I get to get one. This is great news.
Well, it's about time. And there you are.
I can keep it on my counter, now I don't have to give it away. Thank you.
Warren. Appreciate it.
You're welcome, very well. Thank you.
Regardless of your persuasion, that'll give us all something to think about, and the next time we hear about it on television or radio, we'll know that we've got one of our own that's doing his own fight. So, thanks again.